Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My name is Keith Ellison, and we're here for the Progressive Message, the 1 hour that we're in the Congressional Progressive Caucus. We'll come to the American people and talk about what our agenda is. Tonight, it's important to specify, Mr. Speaker, that the Progressive Caucus is going to be on the floor for the next 60 minutes talking about America's economic picture, the landscape that we're facing, and what the progressive vision is for solving these problems. I'm joined tonight by some stellar members of the Progressive Caucus. The lady would yield again. I'd like to direct your attention to this graph, which is an economist named Mark Zandi estimated that the multiplier effect for various policy proposals, and this number essentially, the higher the number is, the more punch. The lower the number is, the weaker the punch. And the things that the Progressive Caucus asked for have, for example, at the bottom here, it says increase infrastructure spending 1.59. Now that's pretty high. Also temporary increase in food stamps, 1.73. That's very high. Extend unemployment compensation benefits, 1.64. That's very high. And Madam Chair, I just want to toss it over to Yvette Clark and just ask, in your view, Congresswoman Clark, are the things that the Progressive Caucus asked for in the stimulus package, they're not only good and decent and demonstrate compassion, but they're also good economic sense. Was that your view? Very important observation. I think it's important to point out that H.R. 1, American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, does spend about 75% of the money within the first 18 months. Much of it is on infrastructure. It will create 3 to 4 million jobs. It does give about 95% of American workers a tax cut. Not the people who already get, but the folks who often don't, a tax cut. If I may, I don't want to spend time on gloom and doom, but I would, my colleagues, ask us to just spend maybe 10, 20 minutes or so on talking about what got us here. I don't know if you want to go back there, but I think it's important to say that it is the absence of a progressive vision that got us to this point. We're talking about years of deregulation and tax cuts for the wealthy. We're talking about economic philosophy that said that poor people have too much money and rich people don't have enough money, so what we're going to do is take from them and give to the ones upstairs. We're talking about tax cuts in the middle of a war, and we're talking about a war that never, ever, 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 ever should have been started. We're talking about an economic philosophy that really was not in favor of the average working family. And we know that when the average working family is doing well, then everybody does well. And when they're not doing well, then we get what we got. The fact is that it is the economic philosophy that has been driving us. What's needed is a progressive vision for our country, an economy that is inclusive, an economy that helps lift all boats, because we do believe a rising tide lifts boats, but you got to rise that tide. Mm-hmm. It's not the ocean liner, but the dinghies that need to be rising up. And so with that, I just invite you all, if you would, just to talk a little bit about what you believe got us here and what the situation is we're confronting. I think it's important for the American people to know that we're not just spending $825 billion on a whim. We're in serious financial trouble. We're talking about the loss of 2 million jobs and change last year. This is an unemployment chart in 2007 and 2008. The blue is 2007 numbers. The red is 2008 numbers. Now, if you can see, every red bar is longer than every blue bar. Can you see that? That means we had a dramatic jump in unemployment in nearly every state. Minnesota's right here, California, Florida, Illinois, Iowa. Every state has had a dramatic leap forward in unemployment. Very serious issue, and I think that it's important to point out that we are here to do something about it.
If the gentleman would yield.
Congresswoman Edwards, the gentlelady yields back. I'd just like to point out that on this chart that Mark Zandi, noted conservative economist, quite frankly, did, in his study, he showed that the revenue transfers to state governments have a pretty high multiplier effect of 1.36, which is pretty high. And if you notice, non-refundable rebates, they're pretty low. Some of these things extend alternative minimum tax. That's very low. That's less than 1. Make income tax cuts expiring in 2010 permanent. That's extremely low. And reduce corporate tax rates. That's pretty low too. So if you really want to get the economy moving, if you want to help business, small business, help the average person, and help those states that you just mentioned a moment ago, Congresswoman, revenue transfers to state governments. And if I may just point out, you mentioned your state, and I'm glad you did, because it's important for people across all the states to know that we're in this thing together. Maryland, New York, Minnesota, we're in this thing together. In my state of Minnesota, the impact of this recovery bill will be state fiscal relief in a significant amount, which is actually over 1,000 million. This is a billion, right? Which is quite a lot of money. Title I education, 117 million. Special education, always fighting for every penny, 216 million. Very happy to point out workforce employment services, 19 million. That's a lot of money. That makes a big difference. Weatherization, y'all, we'd like to get up to zero in Minnesota. If it got to be zero, it'd be a heat wave in Minnesota. Weatherization is important for us, $210 million, very important program. And of course, as you pointed out, when you lose your job and you lose your health care, and so our Medicaid funding at $737 million is a significant amount of money. All told, Minnesota is going to be able to benefit $3.3 billion from the stimulus package, and we have a state budget deficit of about $5 billion. It won't cover everything, but it's going to help an awful lot, and there will be vital services that will not be cut because the federal government, with the influence of the Progressive Caucus, responded to the needs of the people in a real way. And let me yield to, but I just want to point out that one of the progressive values that we share is that we have an inclusive vision, so that we don't engage in regionalism. We think about what all Americans need. And so we're concerned when I see a number like unemployment number in New York at 7%, that sends chills through my spine. Because in Minnesota, we got 6.9%, which is pretty much the same. And we look at Michigan really hurting. Mm-hmm. So we know we need those workforce development dollars there to help get people trained. And the year before that, they were at 7.4. So they've been hurting for a long time. And Rhode Island people are really taking a hit, and in North Carolina as well. One of our values as a Progressive Caucus is that we stand for the American people as a whole. And Congresswoman Edwards, again, here we are moving forward on this stimulus package, and we're going to continue over the course of the year to project a progressive vision and a progressive economy. Thank you for yielding back. Let me say to tonight that it's important for us to realize that this stimulus package really is emergency surgery. It is a crisis, and we're addressing a crisis. But when we talk about a progressive vision, we're not just talking about dealing with this crisis. We're talking about setting forth a new way of doing business, saying that the market will not be allowed to run amok, that the market does not answer all questions, that the market has market failure, and that there is a critical and indispensable role of government. The government is not the problem, but when government doesn't monitor people at the SEC and at other agencies, then we see problems arising. It's a vision of saying that the government has a responsibility to make sure that our economy is fair, that our economy is inclusive, that everybody matters and everybody counts, and people are just not going to be left out. It's a vision that says America should be at peace with the rest of the world, that we should pursue peace, we should promote peace, we should engage in dialogue and diplomacy and negotiation, and that war is the enemy of the poor. Not only is war dangerous to people on the business end of a missile, but it's the enemy of the poor in our country because it saps what poor people need. And we also understand our progressive vision is that our country, a caring nation, a loving nation, should be concerned about the health of its people. And because of that, we need to have universal health care. And one of the best things we could do for the auto industry is to have universal health care. And they would have a lot of problems taken off their shoulders. And so it's important to talk about that as we move into the final moments of our special hour, as we talk about a progressive vision, that we are today dealing with a crisis, but that crisis is not the end of the story, that we're going to be moving into the future, and that we are going to be laying down a progressive vision for quite a long while.